Kavita.
So, very good evening to everybody, and I'm glad to see you all here. I think we have created a space for people across the country to connect. I can see people here from there are people from Lucknow, from Ranchi, from Mumbai. So maybe I'd like you to begin just letting each other know who's there by putting your location and your name on the chat. If you can just do that quickly. It'd be great to see everybody. Wow, okay. Hi, Richa. Okay, that's two from Mumbai. Okay, thanks. From England, from Tamil Nadu, USA. Hi, Ravinder, from Aurangabad. Glad to see you here. Hi, Richa. So we've got another person from Bangalore. So we're just asking everyone to put down where they're from on the chat, just to get a sense. Hi, Padmini. Great to see you here.
Hello. Good to be here.
How are you doing?
Getting there. Hey, Jayashree. Good to see you too.
Hi, Padmini.
Hey. We have a little time. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it's lovely to see where everybody's from, largely because this is something that we've been working across the country in 11 languages. So Hi.
Kavita, we'll take a moment to introduce you. So Jayashree will just say a few lines about you, though I'm sure a lot of people here know you.
I'm not
But
used to
it'll be really
so,
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. No, but that's okay. But we would love to introduce you nonetheless.
All
Yeah,
right.
true.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, of course, Kavita's introduction is really long, but we'll keep it very short because we can go on about her achievements. Yeah, but so anyway, once again, a formal welcome to today's COP session. And
Yes.
so our speaker today is, or our facilitator is Kavita Anand. And so, as we all know, she is the co-founder and executive director of Adhyayan. Kavita has been catalyzing a committed learning community of educators across India to transform the learning of students. For more than 3 decades, as an educator, researcher, funder, school and system leader, and now an entrepreneur, she has worked towards ensuring a good school for every child. Kavita began her career teaching psychology in Mumbai's Elphinstone College. Her curiosity about her students' motivation for their life choices became the reason for researching school based education. She helped spread the educational innovation of the Aga Khan Education Service and then worked to expand the education portfolio of the Sir Ratan Tata Trust. The experience was a launchpad for her own play school, Kids at Play, and for setting up the now renowned K 10 school Shishuvan for a private management in Mumbai. In addition, she has been involved in school setup, curriculum development, professional development, leadership and governance of schools, and school networks before starting Adhyayan as a social enterprise and network. In the last 8 years, Adhyayan Quality Education Services Private Limited has enabled 400 plus schools across the country to adopt stakeholder inclusive self-review for evidence-based improvement, benefiting about 4.4 lakh students in 11 languages. Over 350 existing school leaders and leading teachers are associated with Adhyayan as a professional learning community of school assessors. All these schools are gradually going online to be able to deal with situations like even COVID-19, and they've been able to adapt with Adhyayan's support. To expand exponentially on the scale of impact, Kavita then co-founded the Adhyayan Foundation in 2015, and the foundation is now working across several governments, state governments, in Goa, Tripura, Arunachal, Nagaland, to name a few. Over the last decade, along with her husband and co-founder, Spokey Wheeler, Kavita has provided support for the Open University's TESS India, which developed open education resources for government schools and helped develop leadership resources for the Open University's award-winning English in Action program in Bangladesh, and co-delivered a leadership program for iGate, the World Vision and Open University's foundational literacy and numeracy program for 266 schools in Zimbabwe. Kavita has also been an integral part of the international delivery team for the School Leadership Development Program curriculum with the National College of Teaching and the National University of Education Planning and Administration, which trained over 7,000 government school leaders across 5 states in India. She's a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. Kavita was awarded an Ashoka Fellowship in 2015 for her single-minded determination to improve the quality of education in India. She's also a Kimpro Gold Standard awardee for education. Kavita has also presented many papers on Adhyayan's work at national and international conferences, and she's also an acknowledged public speaker. Thank you, Kavita. So over to you. We are eager to listen to you. And I kept it short, Kavita.
Thank you, Jayashree. Just to remind everybody, this is about a CPD today, not about me. So I hope that we can do that. And thank you so much for that, Jayashree. Yeah, I think the whole business of setting up Adhyayan has taught me more than I've learned before this. And the last 15 years have been an absolute ride, sometimes on a roller coaster. But the one thing that has been very clear for us is the vision that we have, which is how do we make sure that a school is good for every child, right? Not just for the children who are the toppers, not just for the ones who win the awards, not for the ones who just go get the medals, but for every child. So that every child, because a school is meant as a social space created for the growth of the next generation to become capable, confident individuals who can contribute to the country and feel a sense of purpose and have a sort of a reason for being in school in the first place, which means that they know that they have to build a future for themselves. So this entire idea that a school is a space for a launch pad for a generation means that it can't leave anybody out, right? But to be able to not leave anybody out, the truth is that we need a good teacher for every single child. And that means a teacher who is not just learning theoretically in her pre-service training, but when she walks into the school and actually realizes that there is a variety of children in the same classroom that have to be taught. So then adapting and becoming a flexible person to be able to touch every child in that classroom is what continuous professional development is about, right? So today we're going to really try and do a deep dive into that to understand it and to look at what practices we've seen everywhere in the schools that we've been to remind everybody that this is a movement all of you are part of. Many of you have been with us as assessors, or if you've done your own assessment of your own schools after our assessment, then you know that you're leading the change as well, right? And that's something that you're measuring, you're looking at the review as a baseline, and then you're moving forward. So you are all part of this entire process of taking forward the idea that a school has to be good for every child in it. And I know that I have here people who have schools which may have a few hundred children, and I have schools here that have a few thousand, no, not a few thousand, many thousand children. And I think that's the kind of range that we've worked with and said, how do we make it possible for a school with, 500 children to 10,000 children to be good for every child that's in it, right? So the way to do it, obviously, is to make it fun. I hope that that sets the norm for today, that if it's fun, it's infectious, which means all of you have to have a voice. Everybody has to participate in today's discussion, and I hope that that's okay with all of you, and that you're here because it's a good place to talk together. It needs to be inclusive, so अगर किसी को हिंदी में सुनना है तो कह दीजिए कि हिंदी में बात करो, and I'll try and make it possible to do it in both languages. Hindi and English. If there is a requirement, please put it on the chat saying, I would like some Hindi to be included so that I'm included here. And to make it innovative, which is again really important. How did that red line come in? I don't know. But to make it innovative, we look at it in terms of if you're a school under a tree, or if you're a very fancy school with air-conditioned classrooms, you still have practice that can be shared. And the innovation that you have to do under the tree versus in that very, very well-equipped technology-driven classroom there could be something that you have for each other that can be used in the way that only you can, given your context. Yeah. So that's what a community of practice for us has been. All of us sharing our practice, doing that intentionally to improve each other's knowledge and skills so that all the students in all our schools benefit. It's not about my children in my classroom. It's about our children across the classrooms that are there in this country. And we want a very, very strong generation to be born through these schools so that they can take us to a place that is better than where we are today. Okay, so what is the purpose of this community? Why are we here? I think it's very clear that for educators, there is only one big question that plagues us. And that is, what is it that I can do to help my students to learn? And what is it that could get in the way of their learning? And how do I remove that obstacle? For me, it could be that I can see children who are afraid can't learn. So how do I make them unafraid? What do I have to do to make them feel confident? That is what will make me able to enable them to learn better, right? So I might remove that obstacle. Or I might say that a lot of the time children learn by doing things rather than just listening. So I might do something in my classroom to have an activity around a concept that helps my children, my students to learn better. And I am, as an educator, as a teacher, that's kind of my obsession, right? That's what makes me a professional. That's what makes me want to go into class every day and say, what is it that's going on? How can I make this better for my students? How many of you would agree that this is what makes you sort of wake up in the morning asking this question, and you go to sleep at night asking this question? Can I see, thank you, a thumbs up or an emoji that tells me that you're with me till now? Thanks. Okay. Thank you. I can see a fair amounts of agreement. Okay, so that's what we're going to speak about today, that how do we look at this whole practice of continuously developing our professional skills to be able to make this happen, for the benefit of our students. And when we look at continuous, it means that we all know here together in this room that we continue to learn till we are dead and gone and buried or on the funeral pyre, because that's what human beings are. They're continuous learners. There's nothing that you can say, I stopped learning. And so the most frightening thing sometimes to hear is, we've completed this or we've done with this, because I feel that that's just not possible. There's just so much in this world that we don't know. And the more we learn, the more we realize we don't know so much, right? And that is what makes it a continuous process. But the professional piece is that we want to see ourselves as better than just, she's a girl, she's got, a safe job in a school, so it's better that she goes and teaches and becomes a teacher than anything else, because those other things are scary for us as a family. And that kind of an approach does not make you a professional to begin with. It might mean that you fall in love with what you're doing, and that could make you feel like, yes, I want to be a professional and I want to get better. But the approach that we're talking about here is one of a person who has accepted that this is what I really want in my life. This is what my vocation is. And therefore, I treat myself as somebody who needs to get better. None of the professions that we know of are, say, whether it's the medical profession or even somebody who's a person working with the soil in a rural space would be sitting there saying, I don't need to get better at being this person who either produces food, I want to do a better job of it, or sits in a white collar factory and wants to do a better job of it. So if we want to look at the teaching profession as a professional, that's what we have to be looking at here. And that's where the context of this conversation is. And when we talk about development, it's about three kinds that we're going to look at today. What am I doing for myself as a professional? What is it that the school is doing for me? And what is the leadership of the school doing for me? So school, what kind of policies do they put together for me? The leader, what kind of support do I get as a teacher? And as a teacher, what am I doing to improve my own skill set? Yeah. Okay, so we always begin with a sense of what is the big picture. And I'd like you to look at this and give me a sense of what do you see here? How familiar is this for most of us? Knowing Adhyayan, what do we see here? Anybody wants to comment on this? What does Adhyayan always begin with?
Should I?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think in Adhyayan we say provision versus impact. It is something like provision means having resources, wherein impact means how you are utilizing the resources to create impact on your school, on your teachers, and ultimately on the student. Everything is based on these two parameters, right? We see a lot of schools having provisions but no impact. It means as good as they are not having the provision itself.
Brilliant. So, Farid, when you look at this, what do you see here? What is it that we're talking about in terms of continuous professional development? What does it look like? And what is the provision and what is the impact and what is the difference that we've identified here?
Yeah, I think this is in context with the teacher training, I would say, in simple word, right? And there are four categories of ranking in Adhyayan when we go for as an assessor. So these are the four rankings that we allot to the student, allot to the school for any practice that is in place. So yeah, in terms of CPD, we can say rarely a school where hardly anything is there for teachers development, wherein always is somewhere where the school is very keen and very conscious and very alert about the teachers development, and they provide as much possible opportunity as they can, and that's how they grow the school.
Right. So there's a rubric which kind of identifies what is it that schools do and kind of creates the space for them to identify where are they right now and where they should be going next, right? So if you are a school that hasn't provided for any kind of in-service capacity building, then where would you be going next? And if you have done some, then where would you go next? And that's the whole idea, that you kind of create the way of a school being able to say, this is where I am now, this is where I need to go. Now, how many schools do you think we have identified so far? And we've done like, more than 1,000 schools in just doing a review and multiple times of review. So if we were to look at this, and you can see that the mostly, which is where we would suggest that you should aim to be at, even if you don't make it to always immediately, because that's a really difficult space. But to get to a mostly, you need to look at a combination of in-house feedback and external workshops that teachers can ask for, which means that they have identified a need and they're asking for it, right? It's not something that you can decide from outside of looking at their practice. Now, if you know their practice and they have the ability to ask for something, that means that you have a very good process in the school, which is identifying the needs of the teachers. And they have a voice in identifying their needs, right? So that's what the mostly points at. It means that the leadership does very regular work in observation and feedback and has very good targets for saying, this is what, say, most of my teachers might require. So let me organize for this. Each of them also might have their own target, and how do I support that would be the leader's role in this. And the teacher at the individual level would be saying, this is what I want to get better at. So setting their own targets and perhaps identifying from champions that are there in the school, identifying mentoring and saying, I want to learn this from you, right? So that's what you have there. And I'll come back to this slide towards the end, just so that we can have a look at what is the always and what's the difference. But if you get to a mostly, that means that all the teachers in your school have started an improvement journey. That's one thing that you would see. The second thing you would see is that most of them show some improvement in their practice. So there is that impact that Farid is talking about. Both things are impact, that they've started their journey and that they are demonstrating some improvement. And they all get better, but individually get better, right? And that's something that we can look at for the mostly, so that we can distinguish between the mostly and the always, just for you to identify. You can have a look at the always and see what is the difference and what do you see there and what do you read there, perhaps would be interesting to think about. Or share with anybody who wants to share what they think is the difference. Where does one go from there?
May I say something?
Please do. Yes.
To me, what strikes here is that we talked about mostly regarding individual teachers, but here the whole team goes ahead.
Right.
That's the difference.
Yep. That's absolutely right, Pramila. You got it. So that's the whole difference, is that it's a collective improvement, working together to improve each other's practice, right? A bit like what we have in the community of practice. So setting up literally a staff room community of practice, but with the idea that you have to together improve so that the students do better. Now, what interests you about this, because what interests me can be different, but what do you see in terms of what we have noticed across the entire set of schools?
Not very encouraging.
Not very encouraging, because it's really not easy to do what we are suggesting, right? And this is where the difficulty comes in, because it's easy to have that one workshop in June for all your teachers and say, okay, I've now oriented all of you, given you some inputs, go right ahead and do what you have to in class. And we find, like we saw in the previous, in the rubric, in the previous slide, very little practice goes into class. There may be some really interested teachers and they'll take it, but they don't necessarily do it. So to get to that always, which is only 1.6% of the schools which are there, but even to get to the mostly, it's less than 10% schools which are doing this. Yeah. So let's go back there in terms of the slide. Why isn't it going? Yeah. So if we were to say, for each one of us in this room today, where am I? And you don't have to tell me or anybody else, but just identifying where you are. And then say, as a school, if I want to go to the next level, this is what I might have to do. Because what I want to be in as a school is here in the mostly, because that's what's making a difference to every teacher getting better. And every teacher getting better is going to make a difference to all of my students, right? And that is what is so important about having a professional development program that is continuous for your teachers. Because the cost of not doing that is that your students just have to either manage or get by with, possibly with tuitions or with parental support or with something else, but they may not get what your teachers are going to be able to give them, or they will be coasting. So if your teachers are already very, very good, they will simply stay there. They will not improve. And nor will they work as a team to improve each other's practice. Similarly, so if they don't work as a team, you find the same situation over here, but actually worse. Teachers helping each other is really, really small, percentage-wise. As an institutional mandate, very few schools make it possible for teachers to collaborate, work together, really focus on what is working, what is not, evaluating practice, which teachers are doing a better job, why are they doing a better job, what is going on in their classrooms, how can the others learn. That is not a practice that we have found in the schools. That is not easily visible, right? It's in only 5%, 6.3% schools out of the ones that we've been to, and we've got a range of schools that we go to. Any surprises here? Anything that makes you feel, how is that possible? Or do you look at this and say, yes, it sort of makes, it's very, matches my expectation of what I would see?
A lot depends on the head of the school, isn't it?
A lot depends on also the policies that you have as a owner, right? So there are many schools where we have found that it's, the fear is that if my teachers get really good, they will go on join some other school. And I would have invested so much in them and they would go away, right? And the cost for me, the question is that more expensive, or is it more expensive to have teachers who don't improve their practice? Is that more expensive for you in the long run?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Neeta.
Actually, that's a very, warped kind of mentality, because honestly, teachers who are in an environment where learning is valued want to stay in that environment. They don't get attracted to environments just for a little bit extra money. Most teachers that I have met would rather stay in an environment that nurtures them because they feel cared for.
Right. So I think that might also be meaning that schools that have the interest of the teacher at heart, as well as the professional development that they are providing the teachers, retain the good teachers, right? It's the ones who perhaps don't see it as a part of the teacher's entitlement, that you are here as a professional. I have taken you on because I believe that as a professional, you have to keep getting better. And I'm going to make that possible for you. I'm going to create an ecosystem, an environment where you can thrive as a teacher and keep getting better. If that is not the experience, then teachers might leave anyway. So yes, you're right. That is a very interesting thought process, but we have encountered that a lot. Yeah.
May I?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think I'm talking on behalf of slum school, where teacher attrition rate is very high. So what I feel is that the school should have a system in place wherein continuous teachers' professional development is happening, as well as the monitoring of it is also in place. So even if the teachers are moving out for whatever reason, still the school culture remains the same. Because we have seen for a little hike, teacher do shift from one school to the other. I'm not saying they are wrong, because everyone wants to grow in their life, which is absolutely okay. But we being at the school as a school leader, it is our job to make sure that you have a system in place where even if the new teacher comes in, she will get all the necessary support which is required, because ultimately it is for the benefit of the student. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what Neeta is saying is also true of your school, Farid, that it would mean that if teachers knew that they would come and really get better and then have a better job prospect, they might come to your school. Good teachers might come to your school. in that hope that they will get polished like diamonds and sent off somewhere. And you could become a reputed school as somebody who has a fantastic in-service program that actually makes that possible. I used to tell my management that I would love it if lots and lots of teachers from my school became principals in other schools, right? Because that is what the whole idea is, that you can sort of claim that's what you've done, that you've encouraged so much leadership in the school that they have been able to take up leadership in other schools. And that would make your school's name so strong. So I think it's all about how you position it for yourself and for others. But more than that, how do you sell it within your school as to the teachers to say, this is what is really important. You are going to keep getting better. Your prospects are going to get better. And I think even I'm speaking from a private school space, where I say that if you were to have every teacher staying in your school forever, the question of the budget becomes a big issue. And the other question that becomes an issue is you don't have that many leadership options. Like you don't have the spaces for a person to continuously grow. So actually, you are going to have some amount of attrition that is planned attrition. But you can't see that as being a way of keeping people where they are. It's like that would be worse for your school. I think it can be terrible for the students to have teachers who don't get better. So in the long term, your reputation actually depends on the kind of professional development you offer as a school. And if you're famous for that, that can become a space where you attract the best talent. Right? So if that is something that we're looking at for collaborative learning, which is what we talked about, that individual teachers getting better is one thing. How does it work in terms of peer learning? Again, you see that that's even less. Like only 4% of the schools, less than 4% of the schools have peer learning, where people can sort of work together, go into each other's classrooms, do team teaching. That kind of thing is almost non-existent, right? And if we look at what I have experienced personally, is that you really want to have peer work as being a fundamentally important part of your entire process, because there are so many champions you can identify within your school. I think the variability within a school is always going to be large. There's always going to be teachers who are more effective, less effective, and sort of in the middle somewhere. And you want the most effective teachers who have the biggest impact on the children's growth and achievement. They are the ones who can be analyzed, their practice can be analyzed and also then shared with other teachers. And they can become actually your biggest facilitators of professional development. So if you were to begin with, where does it start? This could be part of the way in which planning for a lesson can start, right? You can have it done by teachers who teach the same class or a similar section. They can sit together to do the planning. That's your first piece, where you can have inputs from each other, from the other teachers, and that can make you get more ideas, and that could give you a sense of, okay, this is also possible. And if that is then checked by your head department, then that could become a really important space. How many of you actually have teachers planning their lessons and then sharing those plans with each other? Would I be able to see on this group? How many of you do that? Okay, Pramila, you're the only one who does that. I think that's quite tough.
I don't do it. I have done. I've retired now, so I don't do it.
I know, that's what I was wondering. So,
but I've done it.
Richa,
Revati.
even Richa.
Yeah,
Richa has raised her hand.
we have continued the legacy. We do share the plans.
Yeah, so what do you find happening because of that, Revati? When people share their lesson plans with each other, what happens?
There's a lot of brainstorming which happens, and we better our plans in that sense, because one person thinking and preparing a plan and 4 people coming together and bettering it, is always a good thing. Also, we ensure that there is a learning happening all the time. So the teacher who's impactful will also share her best practices with her co-teachers. So that's how everyone grows.
Exactly, right. Right. And anybody else who, you said somebody else had a hand up. I'm sorry, I can't see everybody on the screen. So who else did?
Richa, I think, right?
Yeah, Richa.
Okay. Richa, you want to share what you see happening because of that? Ravinder, you can also share.
Yes, ma'am. I think alongside the peer learning that we do in our schools, somewhere we need to also look at the kind of responses that we are getting from the kids, because they are at the heart of the learning. So it is always good to go back once in a month to the class and just ask them what are their responses about the kind of teaching you're doing, whether it is going to be good or bad, or what improvement do they see in your teaching. That's a real good way of assessing yourself and keep bettering yourself. You don't need names of the children, just the impressions that come from them, and that actually is, I think, a biggest motivating factor for most of the teachers. And apart from that, I think we also need to have a very strong lesson observation format, which we need to work it out and make sure that every aspect of the learning observation format is done right. And then we can always have a constructive feedback. So if the feedback is not given immediately, I think it doesn't work. So children in the classroom, they are very instrumental, and a constructive feedback from the peers is also going to be very important. Also, when you're planning your teaching plans, it is always good to share with the others so that you can get the inputs and you can always improvise and improve upon it. I think that's going to be very important when we look at CPD.
Right. So I think that whole aspect of being able to comment on each other's plans as a part of the way work happens in the school, as in it's not something that is an option, but it's a requirement. Like, say, for example, if in Shishuvan, the idea was that the review of each other's plans first happens, and then it is sent to the head of department. So that was a sort of a process that was followed, right? And that kind of made it mandatory. So it was easier for teachers to participate in that rather than an optional thing. The other thing that we did a lot, and I don't know how many of you are doing this, what Ravinder is talking about of class observation, like either you have a learning, sort of a walk-through class observation, and you check what's happening in classes, in the beginnings of classes, middles of classes, ends of classes. The other thing that you can also look at is the kind of team teaching that happens, and to look at what happens after a teacher has taught, because very many people forget to do the review of a lesson as a mandatory thing that teachers have to do, right? So they'll deliver the lesson, but very few schools actually ask people to then think about their lesson and say, what is it that really went well? What did I do that really touched the children? And what is it that I have done which seemed to get no response? So there was just, no reaction from anybody. Which was very disappointing for me. I planned this whole lesson and it didn't work out. So that entire business of going back over your lesson and thinking through it, that is the piece that is a really important part of professional development, because that's the conversation you then want to have with your peers in your collaboration with your peers, as well as with your line management, whatever your head of department or section is. So there's an agenda for that meeting, and that it's sort of very focused on getting better at what you deliver.
So Kavita ma'am,
yeah.
My journey with Adhyayan started in 2017, right, at Salav.
That's right.
That was the first year we went for a review. And there's been so much of learning that I've done all through these years that whenever we have this class observation, we always look at the components. So supposing if one of the components says 4 on 4, I know this is where the teacher is extremely good at. But supposing if the teacher is not good at one of the component, say student engagement, then that is where we actually focus our attention. And that's exactly what we look at when we go to the class the next time when we're observing.
Exactly.
And it's always good to, look at the positives and the strengths and keep passing it on and keep working on the ones where we are lagging behind. So anything which is 2, we have to think whether it is moving towards 3 or is it moving towards 2. So if it is moving towards 3, there's definitely development. But if it's moving towards 1, that's, I think, a red flag which we need to look at. And that's how I think the development is going to keep happening. And that's what I learned over the years, and it has worked really, really very well.
I'm so
And the
pleased.
reviews that we did in school reviews, that also gives you a clean outlook of what is exactly happening in the school. So many a time we think 2 days, how do you judge? But yes, the learning walks, sometimes the last 10 minutes, sometimes the first 10 minutes, they are really, really impactful in understanding how the teacher begins his lesson and how does he end it. So a plenary at the end is as good as the opening of the lesson. So everything has to be robust. And as we used to say in, Adhyan, whatever good is happening, it should happen in the first period till the last period, from grade 1 to grade 12, across the year, right? Across the sections. So if it is happening that way, I think we are moving towards what is definitely going to be what looks good like, what good looks like.
Yeah, what good looks like. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Really glad to hear that. I think I hope that you're also doing a book look, because that's the only piece that I didn't hear right now. From what you said, I mean, I'm totally overjoyed to hear.
We are doing a book look also, and there's a rubric for looking at the book look also. A lot of things have been added. We're trying to actually look at how original is the work. So the key word is originality. So if the originality part is there, and you're not doing copy and paste, and there are multiple things that the child is actually doing on his own, it is creative, it is independent. I think that's what the book look should look like.
Brilliant. Okay.
Thank you.
So, yeah, that's really fantastic. And I mean, always very, very wonderful to know that there's something that has been continued. And I think this is something we've noticed, that people who really enjoy the review and the methods of evidence collection use it throughout their lives after that as well. And that's great to hear you validating that, Ravinder. So I think what it's very clear is that if your approach or attitude is that teachers are capable of improving and getting better, want to get better, students are willing to learn, not that they are not. I mean, the most dangerous thing to say is, oh, we don't have children being failed, so that's the reason why we are in trouble, because this whole Right to Education Act has made it impossible. We have to pass the students all the time. But the thing is that entire act was put in place very clearly to say that children have a right to be in school. They have a right to be taught the way they like to learn, not necessarily the way that you find convenient to teach. And that is what is important, that if you find somebody not doing well in your class, you have to think about what to do to improve your methodologies, to create a bigger, diverse range of things that you can do so that you can touch every child. That's the point. So if we have that approach, then the teacher is the most important person that we know of. But that doesn't mean the teacher can do this in spite of an environment that's negative, right? And that is why what you see in research is that what we find, Marzano, who has been working on teacher rubrics forever, they talk about the knowledge base of teaching, so the pedagogy, and then the content and the pedagogy, and then the deliberate practice of that. But if you practice the same thing over and over again, and we often talk about how a teacher is the same from day one to the last day of retirement because they haven't got better, then that is a plateau that is the most sort of deadly one for students. So if we want to talk about practice of that knowledge base, the knowledge base has to keep getting better. It has to keep improving, right? And that is what the evidence that you look for. When you're looking at a school and saying, does it have a good CPD? Then that's what it is. And how does a leader actually look at this whole business of improvement? Now, in all of the schools that we've been to where there is a very involved leadership, we find Vivian Robinson's research coming true completely, right? So there we've spoken a lot about the fact that if you are, as a leader, have to do these many things, right? You have to establish the goals, you have to resource your school, you have to coordinate and evaluate the curriculum. So you have all of these tasks. But the one thing that makes the biggest difference to children's growth and achievement is what she has identified as promoting and participating in teacher learning and development. So if a leader is the leaders of the school are focused on the teachers getting better, which means that you can't have a training program and say, okay, teachers should go for it, but I as a leader can sit in my office. That does not make you promote and participate in teacher development, because you don't even know what has happened in that room. You don't know what the teachers are supposed to do in the classroom, and you cannot support them to take on new practice. So if you are doing something for teachers in your school, as a leader, you have to know what is being transacted in that development space, in the professional development. You have to know what your role is going to be post that professional development session for teachers. And you have to be able to, like you heard Ravinder saying, that if this is what has to improve, then you go and look for that in the classroom post the professional development session. Yeah. So if you don't do that, you can see that your impact is not going to be high. But if you do that, you can have double the impact of any other thing that you're doing. And your students' learning can improve drastically because you have participated in the whole teacher development space that is being organized by you in your school, right? Anybody with experience of this?
Kavita, ma'am?
Yeah.
Ma'am, one dangerous thing about CPD is that most of the teachers do not have the confidence. They feel that after the training has been done, it should work immediately. It never works immediately. It takes time. So what happens is after 2 months or after 3 months, you go back doing the same thing that you were doing earlier. You never have that confidence that it is beginning to take shape, but it will take some more time. And you need to talk. You need to talk with the peers. You need to talk to the principal. You need to talk to the leaders and then discuss how the impact is going to come. And
exactly.
The failure of a child is definitely a failure of the student and the failure of the school. That is what we don't understand. We put the blame back on the parents as well as the children not being able to perform. We seldom understand the fact that when you're pointing one finger at the child or at the parent, there are 4 fingers pointing backwards. So if you realize that, I think you will begin to understand your importance as a teacher, and probably then the change is definitely going to come. But
yeah,
it's a slow movement.
Exactly.
It's a very slow movement.
Agreed. And it's slow, but it has to be supported by the leadership.
Yes,
so the leaders
absolutely.
cannot have the attitude that, oh, I organized a training for you. Now you're supposed to go and do whatever those people said. I don't even know what they said. And sometimes we've seen leaders walk into a class after having had project-based learning and saying, why aren't you writing the answers on the board? Now, if you've organized a training which actually encourages teachers to do a lot of activity-based learning, project-based learning, and then you yourself have the attitude that you have to put the answers on the board, you haven't understood the professional development as a leader that you've organized for your teachers. And I think that can be an absolute disaster for the teachers who then say, okay, all this professional development is just a tick box. We just have to attend it. But actually, if we change practice, we, get a lot of negative feedback, and that can be problematic. So this is why, if you're not in the room, if you're not organizing something and you're sitting there to understand, this is what teachers have to do because this is good practice. I called in this person to teach them this. This is how it needs to show up in the classroom. I have to support the teachers to pick up this practice. As they pick it up, they will grow in confidence. I cannot expect them to be perfect at it the day one after the professional development. This is what a leader's role is, right? And that's what Vivian Robinson has made very, very clear, that this is what is going to be your role in making that child perform better. Or as you heard just now, not sort of blaming the parents or the background or saying the teacher was at fault or the parent was at fault. It doesn't help you to do that as a leader. So somewhere your commitment to every student has to be very clear. And one of the things that we had done always from the beginning was to look at the results in 2 ways, right? So one kind of analysis of results is to look at your cohort and how the performance of the cohort has been. But the other one that we did, and we in fact got students to look at, was their own baseline. Where did they start from? And then how were they getting better? So that kind of analysis, where you're looking at it in terms of the starting point of a child, is known as progress, right? That's where you can see a sort of movement in understanding, in being able to do something, in competencies. That is progress. The achievement is something that is just your final score. And that is the danger in schools that look at it and say, oh, 60% of our class is getting 90%, so it's fine, is that they haven't looked at whether those children getting the 90% were always getting 90% from the beginning itself. A lot of schools who have based their entire reputation on the marks need to first look at where did those children begin. And you can actually be laying claim to a much bigger achievement if your students began at 50% and went to an 80% than if your students who were at 80% went to 90%. Because that means that you've done a very small amount of progress. Your achievement might have been very big. Yeah. And the way in which this was identified largely is Hattie has been pointing this out, and everybody here probably has heard of him. He's talked a lot about the strategies that actually across the entire schools, across the world, has been adopted by schools and teachers to become very good for their students' learning, is that this is about collective teacher efficacy, which is what results in these kinds of schools, right? So that was his concept. And he said, you can have 4 kinds of schools because of what they do for either ensuring collective efficacy or not. So you can have very unsatisfactory schools where you have no progress and no achievement. And we know that that's not a nice school to go to. But you can also have schools which are already taking students who are very, very good, and then just getting them to sort of go through the exams and the achievement looks really great. But actually, those are what he calls cruising schools. Schools that have not added value to a child's ability to learn something for the year, right? And his point is that collectively, if you have decided what is meant for a child for that cohort to learn in that year, then you as a set of teachers have to see how well you're able to make that possible. And if you work together collectively, then you are often able to achieve higher than what you've sort of identified as progress. So, growth schools means that everybody's learning, and we've heard of a lot of this, especially around alternative schools, where people say, okay, they get a lot of experiences and a lot of different kinds of learning, but they don't really come on the top 10 in terms of achievement, right? But those are growth schools, and they could be really fantastic for the students. But the optimal schools are the ones where you have both happening, where there is a lot of growth, where your student has actually moved from where they were, and the achievement of the school is also very good. So that's where you want to move towards, either growth schools or optimal schools, right? That's what you're moving in that direction. Adhyayan's research also, as you heard, we've presented, and Susan was very much a part of that research. And what we found was similar, that if you have somebody like, I think all of you probably here are like these people who we call high self-efficacy leaders, which means you know that you are able to do a good job. You understand what continuous professional development is and why it has to be delivered. So you can make that happen. But if you get a support from the governance of your schools, people who own and run the school, and they support you with policies that are very useful for you, then you can have a collaborative improvement in your school, which means that you are together with your parents, students, teachers, your owners, the governance, everybody together is moving in that direction. They all have understood why teachers have to improve. And so parents don't object if you say that I need a half day for the professional development for my teachers. Students are able to support this when you have a conversation with them saying, has anything improved? And they can tell you that this teacher is doing something even more interesting now than she did before. You have the governors who have created policy that makes it possible for you to afford to have professional development. So this is all, this happens when you have alignment across all your stakeholders. So we had when we created a budget for the school, we would put aside money for every single teacher. And she would know that she could access that amount if she wanted to go for a workshop or to have to participate in the internal programs that were created for the teachers, and they were targeted. Not all teachers had to do all the same thing. So there was a budget, and if that budget was used and used really well by teachers, you knew that they were the ones who you could move into leadership positions because they were really interested in their own development. And that is the kind of way in which you can actually make an incentive for teachers to get better. Right?
Can I say this here? Since I've been a part of your schools, Kavita, I remember this really well when you came back and said, it's been 2 years, you haven't used your budget for professional development. And we were questioned as to why the budget wasn't used. And we were not allowed to carry it beyond 2 years. So we had to figure out, look at our goals, look at our personal journeys, look at the where we are standing in the school, and then decide from there on why our budgets weren't used. So and then in conversation decide which workshops or which training programs were actually important and mandatory to take us to the next level. So yes, thank you for this journey.
Yeah, thanks, Viveki. And that was possible because the management was amenable to it, right? They were okay with the fact that our budget had that space. And it's really important for that to happen. Unless you have support, alignment, collaboration is really not possible, and collaborative improvement is really important. And I think it's about being able to sort of desire that whole, that put your thinking or your thought process into actual action happens when you have a budget that supports your thinking, right? So that is an important piece. So I think if you can get to a place where your leaders and teachers feel that we can together inspire the growth and change that we want in our students, you are succeeding in moving forward. That's where you're going. Yeah.
Kavita, it strikes me that the Holy Grail combines a school's strategic planning, identifying what are the critical pieces that need to be undertaken by all teachers, and then what was at the time that I first saw in Shishuvin really innovative practice internationally, is also saying that each of us has our individual needs and requirements, and we need support to enable us to become even better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I think it's yes, I think what Spooky is talking about is the Holy Grail, that you have to have a very strong belief that you are, the school is not only for students, the school is for teachers, for parents, for yourself. It's for your support staff, everybody. I think the school as a learning organization is only exemplified when everybody's learning. Otherwise, it's just very tough to sort of walk into a space where adults think we've reached the place we want to go. And then I kind of say, how is it even possible, right? Because there is so much more that needs to be learned. And when you really want to, then you find resources like this. So this is in the Department of Education and Training, Melbourne, that was revised and updated in 2020, which looks at the whole business of what all can actually be termed as a high impact strategy. And if you look at this, again, you can see very similar things to what we've talked about, where if teachers are sort of interested in students and themselves setting goals, and this is something that we did when our students did their own evaluation, they had to say, what is the target that we want to go to? We had teachers being able to say, if all my students are, in these kinds of brackets, how do I make sure that the next time I do an assessment or an evaluation, I have done enough work to get them to a different sort of categorization in the class? If you structure your lessons really well, if you have very explicit teaching, worked examples, we've heard these things, right? And here you can see that people are across the world doing research to figure out what is it that teachers need to learn to do. So the minute you begin to say, I want to do this in my school, you will find enough resources everywhere available to tell you what is it that you could be introducing. But the most important piece is what you heard, that if you, as a school leader, if you are interested, if you say, I want to look at your plans, I want to come into your classroom, I want to appreciate the things that you're doing, I want to start with saying that, okay, this was really exciting. Then one of the things that we do at Adhyayan is come to your school and help you orient your position when you're walking into a class to do an observation. Please don't look at a teacher when you're in the classroom. It's very nerve-wracking. Please turn and look at the students. If the students are engaged, if they're asking questions, if they're doing their work, if they're speaking with each other, if they're interested in what's being taught, this teacher is doing a really good job. You can also identify which students are actively engaged and which ones are sort of passive. And you can begin to sort of ask the teacher that, what do you think has gone well? How many students do you see fully engaged? And what do you want to do about those two who are not, right? And that sets the teacher off on a journey of, what do I need to do to reach that disengaged child who may be one in my class, but is an important child, because every child matters, right? So in the same way, I think if every teacher matters to you as a leader, then you engage with every single teacher as a school leader. And if you have a very large school, like we said, we sometimes have schools which have thousands of students, then you have to have a strong distributed leadership that makes it possible for you to do this. Okay, and I think, Ravinder, you said teachers get feedback from everywhere. So as a professional, seeking this feedback from everywhere is really your doorway to becoming better. If you're interested
One
in
thing more I would like to add over there.
Yes.
Ma'am, can I?
Yes,
What generally happens is when the teachers actually become leaders, they go away from the classrooms. They should be more into the classrooms then. They feel that now that I've become a leader, I need not teach. So I need not go into the classrooms. I think you need to go back into the classrooms again and again and tell your teachers to come into your classroom and see how things can happen. I mean, that collaborative approach of the leaders where they begin to be more into the classrooms, I think that is one way of, making the school progress. And that's what I believe in.
150%. That's absolutely true. So unless and until you kind of get out of your room and walk into the classrooms, are interested in being in the corridors, talk to the children in the playgrounds, you're not going to get feedback. So if you're not very participative, even in the staff rooms, I think there was a sort of a mandatory thing where every section leader had to be in the staff room or during lunch, so that you can have lunch with your teachers. That was the kind of way in which you made sure that you got a lot of feedback, right? And were able to speak about it in a non-threatening way with everybody. So I think encouraging your teachers to see everybody as a resource who can, give you the kind of information that you need to be able to say, how can I get better? How do I improve? That's it. And the last slide I want to show you is that it's about being able to check all three things. And this is what we've been able to do for our professional growth program for teachers, which is to say, can we begin to look at these three aspects of teacher, the entire business of how am I planning my lesson, then what is my practice, what is my delivery, how well have I organized that, and then as a professional person, how am I supporting my colleagues? How am I supporting my own growth? How am I supporting the school in improving the instruction for children? So that's where I stop. I'd love to hear from you what's been useful for you from this. I think I'm slightly over time, so sorry about that. But yeah, let's hear from anybody who would like to speak. I think a lot of people have been saying they agree, so I'd love to hear from them as well. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, may I?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand, like, through Adyan program, we say need-based training can be provided, right? Say, for example, if I want to have a training for my teachers and, of course, for myself about data analysis, right? The data can be in terms of students' individual performance. It can be, classroom performance. It can be anything of that sort, which involves data. So how to analyze the data and then how to utilize it for the improvement of the student and the school. So do you have like anything of that sort, like very, very specific kind of training?
Yeah, of course we do. I think what's important is to make sure that it's something that the teachers are asking for. The problem that happens very often is that, as a leader, you kind of say, oh, I think this is what they need. But do they feel they need it? That is the big question. So how would you like to first go back to the teachers and say, this is what I'm asking you to figure out and analyze, and you're not giving me what I can make sense of. Would you like to have a training of this kind? And if there are 5 who say yes, start with just those 5. Don't make it mandatory for everybody else. It doesn't help because the others are going to sit there saying, okay, I was there because I was told. But they will not take from the workshop anything. So do it in a way that's targeted. That's all I would say, and inclusive. Include them in making this decision. Yeah. And yes, of course, all of these things that we talk about, that can be provided. That's not a problem. This is all coming from our own practice. This is what we've actually done. So we can definitely work with you on it. You've been saying yes. Susan's been saying yes. I'd like to hear from you all. I know that we've got a few minutes to get responses. Sorry. Revati, I'd love to hear from you as well. So anyone who'd like to comment on something?
So I wanted to, kind of just fill in with my one thought. This is definitely a takeaway because when the teachers themselves come up with, identify where their professional growth needs to be, that is when the ownership comes in and therefore the effectiveness. Am I right? And therefore the whole growth takes place as a unit. Yeah. So that's my biggest takeaway. Thanks.
Thanks.
Ma'am, I think in this last slide, can we add one more point to it?
Which is?
The teacher effectiveness with planning, practice, and professionalism. There should be one more point, the acceptance to be better. Unless you accept the fact that there is definitely chance for improvement and that we keep improving every single day. There's no learning gap, that we feel that there's not there. So if we accept the fact that we can improve, I think there will definitely be teacher efficacy that we talk about. But we don't accept. We feel that we've done enough and we are ready for the next promotion, and that we should not go back to the lower classes because I've taught grade 5 for the last 5 years. So now grade 7 and then grade 9. And then when I get grade 9, then I'm not meant for grade 5 anymore. So that acceptance is missing, I think, in today's world. And that's why we are not improving upon this particular aspect. So that is also very, very important.
If I can I pick up on that?
Yeah, sure.
That is something I've been really interested in. I really appreciate that last comment. I'm thinking that, does improvement always mean advancement? That's a question on my mind. I put it in the chat earlier. But regarding the willingness to continue to improve, I see that on this last slide as it's kind of like the encompassing culture, right? Like it or perspective. So I don't see it as another bubble, for example, but I see it as kind of like the environment in which these the planning, practice, professionalism, and teacher effectiveness reside.
I think, ma'am, to add on to that is the growth for a teacher is not in terms of the position, the designation, or the money. It is in terms of how many things can you do, how much elaborate things can you do being just a teacher. If that roles and responsibilities you can take up, I think that is what growth means, not in terms of money, not in terms of being a leader, not in terms of anything which is administrative. But that is, I think, what the problem is in our Indian culture. We feel that money is the end of the growth factor. I think it is not.
Okay,
It
but
is important. I don't say it is not important, but I think how many roles you can look at, the diversified roles is what makes you, grow professionally.
I agree. However, I do believe that there are enough schools who could have a sort of a growth plan for teachers, and they don't really have it. Like, so there are not enough leadership roles, there are not enough leadership spaces. If you're very good at something, you're not asked to become a facilitator for professional development in your school. You might be the best person when it comes to, say, display and how to do display, but you're never asked to be the facilitator in your school. Somebody else is called from outside to come and do it. And that's the strangest thing that I find, that, why is it that a school would not value the people that they have? Why aren't they giving them that importance, that sense of being noticed and seen? And that, yes, I know that you're good at this and I can make this possible for others to learn from you. If that happens, then you will create a culture where people see that breadth of ability being a growth, right? But if the only thing that's ever valued, the only people on stage are the ones who are the principals, the vice principals, that's the only people, then everybody wants to be the principal and the vice principal. And that's why then it becomes impossible for you to talk about, good teaching being valuable because of the breadth of what they can do in class. So until and unless you celebrate that, and those people become visible and they get spaces where they can be the leader in that particular aspect, I think we're never going to make that possible. So can we all look at our schools to see, are we celebrating the teachers who are doing a good job? Are we making it possible for them to be recognized? Or do we have a culture in which if we point to a teacher being good, that teacher in the staff room gets beaten up because you have done something fantastic and now we are all going to have to be able to do it, and I don't like you because of that, and that teacher gets isolated. So, what, as a leader, how do we make sure that the culture goes in the right direction and doesn't go in a direction where, like you've seen in classrooms, if a child says, I want to answer, or I want to ask a question, in fact, the other children don't like this. Because it's like, oh, why are you taking up space? You're delaying us. We could easily move to the next topic. That's the kind of responses that you often have in a classroom if the culture is not good. If the culture is good, then you see that being celebrated. So can we have that as leaders? Can we begin to work towards noticing people, appreciating a lot of people, maybe a shout out board for everybody, and you try and find good in every single person and create spaces where they can contribute and be noticed and seen and important? I think that would be great.
And we are doing that. And we are doing that in our school.
Awesome. Then your culture is going to be super in the school.
It's not important for the leaders to be there all the time. They're just like a fresh, breath of air. Be there as something very, very important, yet not seen. And that's how it works. You don't need to have the principal sitting all the time or standing in a function all the time. There are other leaders also, and somebody can come up and do the job. And that's how we celebrate, the success of the school. Yeah. That's very important. We're doing it. I think most of the schools need to understand this.
They do. And especially when you see conferences where the same person is showing up from the school all the time, then you sort of ask yourself, aren't there other people in the school who could go and be, represent the school? So that's the question, that, like, are we making space for that? If we are, and you are, all power to you, and you will do very, very well in creating that culture. That's great. And that's what needs to be shared. Maybe you need to call Viveki, call Ravinder for the next COP. He can talk about the practices and it'll be great.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Okay, sorry, Neeta had her hand up, and I want to give you the last word, Neeta. So I'm going to
No.
try it off myself. Yeah, there you go.
Thanks, Kavita. No, it was just a small point that I actually earlier made in the chat, that I think a lot of the time we look at continuous professional development as just these trainings and workshops and things like that. But there's so many other things that good teachers really want to do on their own. And actually you get such a lot. Like if there's a culture of reading blogs, of watching videos of other teachers, there are so many teaching channels, there's test videos, so many opportunities. I think creating an environment in the school where all this is valued and somewhere just given importance and time is made for it, because a lot of the teachers do then get bogged down by other duties. So making time in the teachers' day also, not just cramming them with silly work, busy work even for them. I think that's just what I wanted to add.
Yeah. I think that's a very valid point, Neeta. And a lot of people have tried to do that for their teachers, and they've been very worried about the fact that teachers see it sometimes because it suddenly comes as, oh, this is what Neeta said, I have to make space. And then it's the teachers see it as, oh, this is our free period because we give children free periods. Now we've been given free periods. And that's even funnier. So I think it's very often very important to also have the way to introduce this idea that there's 80% of your time that's going to be in planning and delivering your lessons and doing research, etc., and 20% maybe in other things to do with innovations or clubs or something like that. And you kind of really have to introduce it in a way that says we're not here to simply say, okay, you can do absolutely nothing, but to say how do you want to use that time in a way and provide that space. So a lot of work has to get done, because like you're saying, a lot of schools we've seen, 8 periods out of 8 periods are teaching periods. And that's kind of really worrying, because you think about the impact on a teacher, exhausting to do something like that. Very, very tiring. So yeah, so shifting from that, which I would call a rarely practice, to one where you have time for doing a lot of things, a range of things that support students. That's what the shift is. And it has to be planned very well. But thank you for saying that. I think it's very useful. Okay, anybody? Okay, wow, a genius hour. You want to tell us about that?
So we used to do this for kids, and then we said, why not do it for teachers also, where it doesn't really have to be only about teaching, right? If you learn, as long as you're learning, it's valuable. So if you spend 20%, not of the week, but at least in a month, we used to learn from each other things like sketchnoting, and there were various such clubs for teachers to join where they could pursue a passion pursuit rather than just something related to education, because we just wanted to get this message across that all learning is valuable and you need time to pursue these things as well.
Totally. Great. So Jayashree, over to you again. And if you want to close today.
Yeah, thank you, Kavita. Just before we leave, I would like everybody to just go on to the Google form and fill in your, last bit, your name, because name and your feedback for the session and what did you take away. And Kavita, thank you. It was very, very engaging and illuminating 1 hour, I would say. And thanks to everybody who participated in the chat, as well as unmuted and spoke. It was really valuable, a lot of inputs. And I think the COP is all about, just coming here, sharing, talking, deliberating, supporting, and taking ideas from one another. And I thought that was really, that really happened today in today's session. Thank you so much for participating and coming over this afternoon.
Thank you, Kavita ma'am. It was insightful, very interesting, very engaging. We would love to have more of such,
Yeah.
deliberations in future.
I would love to attend your session soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, everyone. Have a great, wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Bye-bye. Bye, Revati.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.
Bye bye. Thank you.